The compact crossover segment is an incredibly hot segment right now. The top three players, the RAV4, the CR-V, and the Ford Escape, are expected to each sell over 300,000 of these crossovers in the year 2016. With sales numbers like that, it is not surprising that Toyota went back and completely refreshed the RAV4 for the 2016 model year. In the past, Toyota has been accused of creating bland designs, and I think these more polarizing designs are definitely the right direction for the brand. Our model is the top-end limited trim, so we do get these full LED headlamps with LED daytime running lamps, fog lamps right down here. We also have a radar sensor located right here behind this large Toyota logo because we now have adaptive cruise control in the RAV4. At a hair under 180 inches long, the RAV4 is one of the larger entries in this segment. It is a hair shorter than something like a Nissan Rogue or a Jeep Cherokee, but it is a decent amount longer than a Hyundai Tucson or a Ford Escape. The overall styling of the rear is perhaps a little bit plain compared to some of the more aggressive entries in this segment, but it's all because Toyota has tried to give you a very practical cargo area. You can really see the overall height of this hatchback. It really goes quite close to the ground. The design of the rear end in the RAV4 and this very tall hatch means that the cargo load floor is a little bit closer to the ground and the entry point is closer to the ground. However, on the downside, you do have to back up further from the vehicle in order to actually open this hatch without it bopping you in the face. Front seat comfort is very good in the RAV4 thanks to a two-way adjustable lumbar support that we still don't find in every entry in this segment. Of course, our model is the limited model, so we do get upgraded seats as well as a two-position seat memory. On the downside, the tilt telescopic steering column does not have a very large range of motion. That may make it a little bit more difficult for taller drivers to find a comfortable driving position. The rear seats in the RAV4 are surprisingly large, and in fact, you will find more room back here than you'll find in many mid-sized crossovers. These rear seats also recline. There's a lever right here on the seat. This is the most upright position, and then they recline to a quite reclined position for this category actually. You can get fairly comfortable in the rear seats in the RAV4. Because this is one of the larger crossovers in the segment, you can fit larger things in the back than you can in some of those other crossovers, namely items that are 4 feet wide. So you can put an item that's, for instance, about 4 feet by 4 feet in this vehicle. Now, it will have to be at a slight angle. You can't actually put it between the wheel wells like you would in a minivan, but you can actually get it in the back, and you can't in every crossover out there. The front seats are perhaps a little bit more heavily bolstered than you might expect in a Toyota, and they are in this two-tone pattern in our model. It may surprise some of you that the RAV4 has one of the more premium interiors in this segment, even though we have a decent amount of hard plastics going on. Toyota has taken a trick basically out of some of the Koreans' playbook and given us soft touch plastics where you reach, and then hard touch plastics that are well out of reach. So this upper portion of the dashboard is a hard touch plastic, but this portion of the dashboard is actually a stitched piece of pleather. The stitch panel continues all the way from the passenger side on over to the driver's side. We have 2 large air vents on either side of this infotainment and navigation system. This is basically the same system that we see in a variety of other Toyota models. The software is also very similar to what we see in certain Lexus models. The shifter is a gated version, so we don't have a button or anything. We just pull it all the way down through the gates in order to get to drive, click it over to the left for sport mode, up for up, and down for down. The steering wheel is a little bit thicker than I remember the last RAV4 we drove, and we do have sport grips right up top. This is a 3-spoke design. As we've seen with other Toyota models, the cruise control is controlled via this stalk right here on the steering wheel, and it does move with the wheel. And then, of course, this button right here on the steering wheel itself. This controls the set distance between you and the car in front of you if you do have the optional radar adaptive cruise control system. Otherwise, you would just have this stalk that, again, turns with the wheel. The RAV4 is one of the entries in this compact crossover segment that marches to a different drummer. Jeep is, of course, going for a very off-road focus in their Jeep Cherokee. Subaru has, of course, the Subaru fans out there. The Mazda CX-5 is the sporty entry. The RAV4 is more of the comfortable highway cruiser. The suspension in this RAV4 and the overall ride is quite soft for this segment, even though our model does have the larger wheels and larger tires. That does take a little bit of a toll on the ride, so you will find an even more supple ride in the base versions of the RAV. That means that when we're out here driving on rough roads like this, the RAV4 has a much more polished ride than we find in a lot of the competition. Some of the entries in this segment, like the current generation Kia Sportage, I'm not talking about the new one, they can feel definitely unsettled in the rear. You also see that in some of the less expensive entries in this segment, like the Nissan Rogue at certain speeds. The RAV4 has a relatively soft and compliant suspension, but it always feels very sorted. Sort of in tune with the soft ride, we also have leisurely acceleration. We clocked 0 to 60 in 8.9 seconds, which does make this one of the slowest entries in this segment. In fact, the only compact crossover that I can think of that went slower slower 0 to 60 than this would be the base 2-liter engine in the Mazda CX-5. The 2.5-liter up-level engine in the CX-5 that is by far the most popular engine option actually goes 0 to 60 in about 7.7 seconds, so that's a decent amount faster than this. When it comes to absolute braking and handling numbers, the RAV4 doesn't do too badly for itself because this is not a terribly heavy vehicle. It's just over 3,600 pounds in the trim that we're taking a look at right here. And it does have wide 235 with tires, which definitely help the braking score especially. This went 60 to 0 in 127 feet. That's notably shorter than some of the entries in this segment with skinny tires. Toyota has taken an interesting course with the RAV4 and programmed the center coupling to be very aggressive in terms of lockup. So from a standstill, you don't need very much wheel slip in order to fully lock that center coupling. And of course, you can manually lock it at any time with a little button over here on the side of the dashboard. And that is getting very, very rare in any segment, including this compact crossover segment. There was a time where basically everyone was doing that. Now, it's basically just the RAV4. Obviously, when it comes to off-roading, the Jeep Cherokee is still the superior entry because not only do we get a locking center coupling, we get the available locking rear differential and an available 2-speed transfer case. But this sort of plays in a different segment than that Jeep Cherokee. Interestingly enough, even the current generation Subaru Forester does not have a manually locking center coupling. Now, interestingly enough, when Toyota says they're locking the center coupling, they actually mean they lock the center coupling. They're not allowing a little bit of slip. That unit appears to be fully locked. And that does mean that when you turn the steering wheel tight with that unit locked, you do get binding of the axles. That means that you should obviously only be using this locking mode on loose surfaces like gravel or sand, something along those lines. But it also means that the RAV4 is going to be more capable on those surfaces than your average all-wheel drive entry in this segment. And in some limited circumstances, I might say even more capable than Subaru's all-wheel drive system. Because even though the Subaru all-wheel drive system is always on, it is not always locked, and it does not offer a completely locked mode like this. That means that this system is actually a little bit more capable of sending almost all the engine power to either axle when it needs to, as long as your speed's below 25 and you have that module locked. On the downside, the RAV4 these days only offers 6.3 inches of ground clearance, so while this may have a very capable all-wheel drive system, it doesn't have a whole lot of ground clearance. Toyota has priced the 2016 RAV4 very well for this segment. It starts at $23,680 for the base LE model, and if you add all the options up like we're seeing basically in the model we've been looking at, you'll end up right around $35,230. The model we've been looking at today is an essentially fully loaded limited trim with all-wheel drive. If you want the hybrid, you'll find that in the XLE and the limited trims for about an extra $2,100. Toyota has priced the RAV4 sort of in the meat of the compact crossover segment. Feature for feature, you'll pay about the same amount for the RAV4 as you will a Ford Escape. This will be about $2,000 less expensive than a CR-V depending on how you configure them. That means that depending on the options that you select in your RAV4 or your CR-V, you may actually be able to get a hybrid RAV4 for about the same price as that Honda. Depending on the features that you're interested in, you may even find that the RAV4 is a better value than the Hyundai Tucson, because the latest version of the Hyundai Tucson, although it does have their new 1.6-liter turbocharged engine, you won't find a number of the features that you find in this model or even the XLE model, which is one step down from this, for about the same price. You do have to hop on all the way up to the top-end trim in that vehicle in order to get leather, for instance. On the other side of the equation, the RAV4 is going to be a little bit more expensive than the Nissan Rogue. It's going to be about $1,000 to $1,500 depending on how you configure them. You can also get that optional third row in the Nissan Rogue, which we can no longer get in the RAV4. Although the RAV4 really competes more with the Kia Sportage than the Kia Sorento, this is going to be about $3,000 to $4,000 less expensive than a comparably equipped Sorento. However, that really depends on which version you're looking at, because the Sorento does get very inexpensive. So if you're taking a look at sort of base trims of the RAV4, LE trims or approximately thereabouts, then you will find that the Sorento will be a little bit larger, but it's not going to be very much more expensive. If, however, you're taking a look at the XLE trim that I mentioned, it's at $30,925 for this RAV4, a comparably equipped Sorento is going to be about $4,000 more. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2016 Toyota RAV4. Be sure and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so, and I'll see you next week.